All right. So today, I think we're going to have a really fun and interesting one. We are pitching an MCU movie. Now, I just want to get something out of the way at the beginning before we start. My partner still actively watches the MCU, but I have not seen an MCU project since Endgame, except for No Way Home. So most of Phase 4 and all of Phase 5, I have seen nothing. For the purposes of this pitch, we're keeping it within the MCU continuity. So I did lean on my partner for a little bit of help. So that way I made sure I didn't do something too out of sorts with my pitch. But I did just want to state that at the beginning. Not quite sure how much his links in with the MCU or if it's relatively separate, but this is going to be in continuity. This would be a future movie that they would do. If I'm not mistaken, both of us picked movies that have already been announced to be made. They just have not come out yet. So we are giving our pitches for what we would do if we were in the shoes of the creators making them. So with that, I will go ahead and throw it over to you and you can get us started.
Okay, thank you. I am very excited both to be able to pitch mine and to hear yours as well. Okay, so what I will be pitching today is Tom Holland's Spider-Man 4. Like you said, this has been announced. We know that this is coming in the MCU with Tom Holland returning, continuing the story from No Way Home, but we know basically nothing about the actual plot. So I kind of just take that we are doing a Spider-Man 4 and just took it and ran with it with where I would like to see his portrayal as Peter Parker go. So this is very contingent on having seen No Way Home, which is sort of self-explanatory, but just anyone who maybe doesn't want any spoilers, because maybe you're like the only person on Earth who hasn't seen it or don't know what happened, then this isn't for you. But you've at least seen No Way Home, so you'll get a lot of how this works in. So, okay. So my pitch opens up to the wreckage at the site of the new Statue of Liberty, where the battle at the third act of No Way Home took place. We see the Department of Damage Control is cleaning up and cordoning off the scene, and to no one's notice, we see Dr. Octopus's severed tentacle arm. If you recall from No Way Home, it explicitly shows how one of his arms gets cut off and falls to the base of the statue. We see while they're cleaning up, we see Dr. Octopus's severed tentacle arm awake. Its red light turns on, and we know from Spider-Man 2 that these kind of have a mind of their own, and it's no longer connected to that inhibitor chip anymore. So essentially, it's kind of just gone rogue with whatever AI programs in it, and it escapes into the Hudson River. And a nearby damage control agent hears the splash of it entering the river, but looks and sees nothing and decides to shrug it off. We then cut the same night to the prison where Mac Gargan, played by Michael Mando, who we saw in Spider Man Homecoming as one of the thugs on the Staten Island ferry, is serving with Adrian Toomes, with the Vulture himself, with Michael Keaton reprising his role. Mac Gargan is in Toombs's cell after dark, and him and some of his jail thugs are basically beating him near death, trying to get him to spill the identity of Spider Man. As we know, put Gargan in there after the events of Homecoming. Toombs continues to swear that he doesn't know why, but he forgot who Spider Man is, as we know, as a result of the ending of No Way Home, because at one point he did know Spider Man's identity, and now he is swearing on his life that for whatever reason he forgot who Spider Man is. And he doesn't know why, he just can't remember. So Gargan leaves him in a bloody pool, and Gargan tells his goons that he is going to break out and kill Spider-Man himself. So then we have a giant title, or sorry, not title card, location card come up that just says 9 months later. So we open back up to New York City at nighttime. We see a group of high school age jocks and just sort of like general thugs, ne'er do well looking figures. They're breaking into a seemingly abandoned warehouse down by the docks that claims to be owned by Hammer Technologies, Justin Hammer being Sam Rockwell's character from Iron Man 2. In the shadow of the foreground, we see Spider Man crawling on a neighboring building, staking out this sort of warehouse break in. The group walks in, they see a bunch of crates, they see a bunch of shipping containers. One of them uses a crowbar and opens up one of the crates, finds a whole bunch of cash. Another one opens a lock on a shipping container and they find it full of cash and gold. And they start to pour gasoline everywhere. One of the jocks reaches to take some of the cash for himself, but the leader swats his hand away and basically says that the quote unquote boss would kill them if they took anything. But before the leader can drop the lighter on the gasoline, Spider-Man confronts them, and he addresses the leader as Flint Marko, who we know as the general identity of Sandman. It reflects to him that he's been looking for him for a long time, and this will all be explained momentarily, that he's been looking for him for a long time. He webs up the goons, a battle ensues, some run, he catches them, he webs them up, he fights them off. Before he leaves, Flint manages to strike a match and ignite the gasoline, so Spider-Man barely gets out of the warehouse alive before it all catches on fire. Peter leaves the boys as the police and the fire department show up, and he tells Flint that he needs to clean up his act, leave his life of petty crime and thuggery, quote unquote, for his daughter. And Flint asks him, "What daughter?" as he swings away. Then we get a title card that comes up, the title of my movie that should tell you somewhat about where it's going: Spider Man Gang Wars. So, Peter swings into his apartment and takes his mask off. He's coughing from the fire. He throws his suit into the dirty clothes and he walks over to a board where we see that Peter, as part of his mission from No Way Home, where he redeemed the villains from these other universes, he has been tracking down the MCU versions of. I'm calling them the Sinister Six, even though there was technically five. I think it was meant to be the Sinister Six in No Way Home. So we'll just say the different MCU versions of like Dr. Connors, of Max Dillon Electro in the MCU and stopping them from becoming villains. So in this sense, he tracked down Flint Marko, who in the MCU was like a high school age jock at this point. And so he was trying to keep tabs on him and then get him on a straight path. But the only one of the Sinister Six that he has absolutely no leads on is MCU Norman Osborn. And he's basically convinced that there is no Norman Osborn in the MCU. And in his apartment, we see all sorts of things. We see a GED that after the events of No Way Home, he finally did technically graduate from college. We see some textbooks, and we see that he is starting his first day as an engineering student at Empire State University, a famous location from the Marvel comics that I am bringing to life in the MCU. He is starting that the next day. So that same night, we cut to this immaculate Manhattan penthouse. There's a roaring fireplace. There's a figure sitting in an armchair smoking a cigarette. Up the elevator, a man gets off. He's vetted by two bodyguards outside the door, and he approaches the armchair boldly, only to be accosted by Tombstone and Hammerhead, who give the guy a hard time before the man in the chair tells them to let him approach. And he reveals himself to be Silvermane, the Don of the Magia crime family, historically New York City's most notorious and powerful criminal organizations. The man tells him news that he already has basically figured out, like he knows that this is happening. He tells him that one of their cash storehouses by the docks has been sabotaged and burned down, and they're now more than $50 million down. So Silvermane takes a long drag of his cigarette and he tells the man he knows exactly who did it and says Fisk has made the first move. He orders Tombstone and Hammerhead to basically organize the troops and said Fisk just fired the shot heard round New York. He wants a war. We'll give him a war. So the next morning, Peter wakes up a little later than anticipated. He rushes to get ready. He uses his powers to sort of creatively help him get ready. He rushes to the ESU campus, including stopping by a renovated Mr. Delmar's for a breakfast sandwich, Mr. Delmar being the bodega owner from Homecoming. And while he's getting ready, we cut to Wilson Fisk with Vincent D'Onofrio reprising his role in a limousine. And this was before they said that Daredevil Born Again was essentially making Daredevil canon. So in this pit, in this pitch, he still has Wesley, which, if you recall, Wesley's killed in Daredevil season one. So I'm just pretending that he has Wesley because Wesley's big in the comics as like his like right hand man and like his fixer. So he's with his right hand man Wesley. They're on their way to a campaign event because Wilson Fisk is running for New York mayor. Fisk orders Wesley to have their men in the NYPD precinct that are holding the boys um that he basically reveals that he paid those boys to go and burn those cash stores that Silvermane had, and he tells them to get their men on the inside to basically eliminate them and close all the loose ends. Wesley places the call as Fisk talks about garnering his goons, preparing to go to war with the Maggia crime family to finish them off once and for all. As the call is made, we cut to the precinct and we see a cop relieving the existing guard that's guarding the boys that got arrested the night before. He slips some poison into their food for Flint and the other boys, and he gives it to them. So then Peter just steps onto the ESU campus, his first class beginning soon, when his spider sense begins to tingle. We see a few blocks away, Fisk is holding his mayoral event where he delivers an impassioned speech about fighting organized crime and eliminating it once and for all. When an armed caravan of goons pulls up and starts opening fire on the event in an attempt to kill Fisk. So Peter webs his stuff up in a tree, he suits up, he swings to the event, he subdues the goons, a big fight ensues, but Fisk's wife, Vanessa, is hit by a stray bullet that Spider Man failed to stop. After the goons are all taken care of, Peter swings back to campus. He gets his stuff, he unsuits, and he walks into his class late. All the class stares at him. The professor, Dr. Spencer Smythe, who people might know from the animated series as the inventor of the Spider Slayers, glares at him and goes back to take his seat in the back of the class. The class is revealed to be AI and robotics, and we can throw in an Easter egg there where the professor talks about they'll cover AI from Jarvis to Ultron to Vision, just like throwing in some Easter eggs in there. So in the back, Peter sits next to a kid named Theo Lyman, played by Dominic Sessa, the star of The Holdovers. And the two just hit it off and become quick friends. And Theo invites him to a beginning of the year party at his dad's Manhattan penthouse that night, and Peter accepts. And in the next class, he meets a young blonde that's his lab partner. The two hit it off and flirt, but Peter doesn't make much of a first move because he's still getting over MJ, and all he catches before lab's over is her name, Gwen Stacy. So in the hospital, Fisk awaits news of his wife Vanessa's status after having been shot, and a doctor comes and informs him that Vanessa will be fine. The bullet didn't hit anything vital. It'll be a slow but steady recovery. So Fisk talks to Wesley and tells him to tell his men on the streets that now is the time for the all-out war with the Maggia, and he also says that he has vowed to kill Spider-Man. So I didn't really divide this into acts as I told you, but this is sort of the stopping point of like my act one. So just general thoughts so far, points of discussion, things like that for like my act one so far.
I have a quick question. When you mentioned the board, when he swings in and we find out that he's been trying to help out the MCU versions of the Sinister Six, when you said the only one he has no leads on is Norman Osborn, has he already helped all of the other ones by this point, or is it just implied that he has leads and will help them down later?
I didn't commit to one or the other, but I think what I'm thinking at least now is everyone's X'd off, best X'd off Flint Marco. And then the only one he has absolutely nothing on is Norman Osborn. So I think I'm gonna go with everyone else, like the Max Dillon, the Curtis Connors, the Otto Octavius, and then Flint Marco, even though now he's been taken out by Fisk. For all intents and purposes, he knows that they exist. He's confronted them or done whatever, keeping tabs on them, knows they're not turning into a supervillain. And yeah, and then Norman is the only one he just has absolutely no lead on.
Okay. And then I know you mentioned about how now that Daredevil's canon, Wesley wouldn't be in this. Knowing that now, would you swap Wesley with like a Tombstone or like take one of Silvermane's away, or would there be another comic villain that you would make his right hand man? I know this is just off the top of your head.
No, probably. If I made Tombstone bodyguard or whatever, that would remind me a little too much of Into the Spider-Verse, where that's just what it is it's Kingpin with Tombstone. But I just picked Tombstone and Hammerhead both to I honestly did give them much in this story. They're mostly there to be like the two chief goons for Silvermane. But yes, if like and now looking back, I would probably swap Wesley out for someone else.
Okay. And then, so just to make sure that I follow, uh, Silvermane is going after Fisk. Fisk is going after Spider-Man, and Scorpion is going after Spider-Man. So those are the three big players at the moment.
Well, yeah, at this point, Matt Gargan's just Matt Gargan. Who's to say he's going to turn into Scorpion? You don't know. And then,
Well, I'm gonna use the powers of that cute little thing from the beginning where the tentacle sneaks into the water. I just feel like that's gonna be coming back later.
potentially.
Also, so yeah, no, I promise I for the listeners, I promise I haven't pre-read this. I'm just using context clues.
Um,
Um,
yes. So yeah, those are like so Gargan wants to break out and kill Spider-Man as
mhm.
revenge for for being imprisoned in Homecoming. Silvermane is trying to take out Fisk for reasons we don't fully know yet. And then Fisk is now acting in retaliation against both Silvermane and Spider-Man because he blames Spider-Man for failing to save Vanessa. Or like she's still alive, but like still the fact that she got shot.
Okay, so realistically, at this point at least, as far as the gang wars are concerned, we have Fisk and his people, Silvermane and his people, and then Gargan's kind of just there, and he will play a part at some point, but he's not technically a part of the gang war, quote unquote, yet, if not ever. Like, I'm going to assume at this point he's a solo entity, as opposed to it's not like he's told his people, all right, we're going after Spider-Man.
Yes, but hold
Okay.
that thought.
Okay, so then I follow. So far, I am definitely interested, as we've probably talked about before. I think it's an interesting choice when movies try to balance a crap ton of characters together. I have all the faith in you, and I'm curious to see where this goes.
Yes, yeah, that was the tough part where I was writing this, I was getting so giddy. I was just like adding so many characters, and I was like, I really need to like make so like obviously this is very big picture. It would definitely need to be like worked out better if it was like actually scene by scene. But like, yeah. So there are a lot of characters. So just we'll pretend it all works.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm with you. Proceed, sir.
Okay. So sort of my act two. So back at the Magia headquarters, which I guess is just that sort of penthouse that Silvermane has. Well, actually, real quick, did you ever watch the Spider-Man animated series?
I've seen clips, but I definitely have not seen it the whole. I'm sorry. I watched episodes every now and then if they happened to be on when I was younger, but I definitely have not seen all of them and definitely not in chronological order.
Okay. I watched it a lot as a kid. Silvermane was sort of like he's like lesser known in the comics, but he was a bigger part in the animated series. He's sort of just like the Carmine Falcone. Like other than Kingpin, he's like the main mobster person in New York in Marvel Comics.
Yeah, this was giving me Carmine versus Salvatore vibes.
Pretty much. That's kind of, I mean, Kingpin is like the guy, but like Silvermane in the comics, at least for Spider-Man, he's very much like a Carmine Falcone figure. So
Okay,
I just wanted to make sure that that was out there.
I gotcha.
Okay. So back at the Magia headquarters, um, Silvermane basically chews out the guy. I didn't give him a name. We'll just call him his Wesley. And so he chews out his Wesley, who basically helped organize the assassination, and he has Tombstone strangle him to death with his superhuman strength. So then Hammerhead asks Silvermane what their next move is, and Silvermane says that Fisk is definitely going to be a force to be reckoned with, and now Spider-Man's potentially thrown into the mix. So he tells him and Tombstone that they need to break Mac Gargan out of prison because he was his top operative and lethal in the streets, and they need him. So, what I'm trying to apply here in Spider Man Homecoming, when he was arms trafficking on the Staten Island ferry, that he's been working for the Magia crime family as his like primary criminal outlet all the way
Gotcha.
back in Homecoming. So he's like their prized person. who's good at mobster activities.
Okay.
So that night, Peter prepares to get ready to go to Theo's party, um, that beginning of year party. He arrives, he's blown away. Theo's dad's penthouse, beautiful view of Central Park, beautiful view of the Hudson. He sees Gwen again and excuse me, sees that she was invited, and the two basically continue to sort of hit it off and flirt and have this very flirtatious energy. As this happens, we see Gargan in his cell, and so it never specifies like where this prison is, but for the sake of this script, we're gonna say it's basically like a Rikers Island where it's like off the coast of New York on an island, sort of like Alcatraz, but for New York. So we're just gonna pretend that it's there. So as this
Okay.
happens, we see Gargan in his cell. He gets broken out when some Magia operatives who are kind of just decked out in full gear basically break him out. A huge firefight ensues, and he's led away by Tombstone and Hammerhead, who break him out of the prison. They put him on this speedboat and they cross the Hudson to make a big getaway. Then back at the party, as this is happening, Peter begins to, him and Gwen are getting a little bit more flirty, and he finally starts to lean in for a kiss. But she basically looks a little bit grossed out, and he's quickly intercepted by Theo, who swoops in and basically introduces Peter. Have you met my girlfriend, Gwen Stacy? So then Peter awkwardly says hi to Theo. The whole situation is just really awkward. But to make matters worse, his spider sense begins to tingle, and he looks out at the penthouse bay window towards the Hudson, towards the new Statue of Liberty, and he basically senses that something's happening there. And so he basically quickly excuses himself and leaves the penthouse, and basically leaves everyone with the impression that he was just so embarrassed, which he is, but you know, they just think it's just because he's so embarrassed that he almost kissed Gwen, because basically everyone saw that. So
Hmm.
he goes up to the roof of the penthouse, he suits up, and he jumps off and swings away through the skyline to the top from the top of the apartment building to Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty. So the speedboat lands on the shore of Ellis Island, the foot of the Statue of Liberty, and they prepare to get Gargan out of there when Spider-Man swings onto the scene and tries to stop them. A fight ensues as Spider-Man dodges gunfire. He takes out some of the goons and he fights Tombstone and Hammerhead. And at one point, I want him to go for a punch, and then Hammerhead dips his head and his fist just bangs into his skull, and his hand is like broken, and he's like actually in pain. And Hammerhead makes some passing reference that his skull's made of, we'll say, vibranium. Just like putting it in there. So Spider-Man's busy fighting off Tombstone and Hammerhead, so Gargan decides to just make his own escape, and he gets in the water to begin to swim towards the shore in the city. And as he does, he brushes up against the barnacled, seaweed-coated, severed Doc Ock tentacle from 9 months prior. So you did put the pieces together correctly. And it comes to life, the red light turns on, and it basically attacks Gargan in the water. And I sort of envision this like a horror sequence, almost like the beginning of Jaws, where it like senses him in the water and attacks him. And basically, the other end, not the hand end, sort of just like jams itself into his spine and like connects with his like spinal cord and his nervous system. And it begins to talk to him in his head, sort of not like audibly, but like how Dr. Octopus could hear their tentacles talking to him. And it basically proves that it can be more than just a hand, and starts to morph, and it morphs into this like propeller shape and helps him get into the water and swim away very fast, like a propeller almost. So then Gargan gets away. Spider-Man subdues Tombstone and Hammerhead. He looks around for Gargan but doesn't see him. So the police show up and Spider-Man eludes them and makes his escape, but he watches them arrest the goons from atop of the Statue of Liberty. And just as he's about to go away, he overhears one of them talk about a gang war, and he name drops the Magia crime family and quote unquote the Kingpin, which draws in Peter's curiosity. So back at his apartment, Peter clears out his board of MCU Sinister Six variants, and he begins a new board trying to look into the Magia crime family and who this Kingpin is. All he finds on the internet is that the Maggia crime family is a notorious mafioso organization originating in Sicily that came to New York in the early 20th century, and it's transferred hands frequently, and no one knows if it's still active or who runs it. And all the hits for the quote unquote kingpin are just blog posts and Reddit posts that are conspiracies about a singular figure who is single handedly taking over all the criminal organizations in New York City, in the New York City underbelly, with a bunch of theories as to who it is. And I figure this would be another good place to put in a bunch of MCU Easter eggs of like different figures we've seen before that they
The
think could
entire
potentially be the kingpin.
Defenders should have articles.
Yes, pretty much. Just fill in anyone. Justin Hammer is the I know I already mentioned Hammer, but like Justin Hammer could be the kingpin, so and so could be the kingpin, just like various villains.
Oh, all that gives me is Iron Man 3 Mandarin vibes.
Yes, pretty much. So then Peter realizes that he's in a new kind of way being in over his head. He has no idea how to do anything street level. He's using the Karen in the suit from Homecoming, or all the Stark tech in the Iron Spider suit. He basically realizes he has no idea how to do any of this on his own, and he has no pulse on the street. Any of this on his own, like without technology and doing things on the street level. And he has no finger on the pulse of the streets, if you will. So he decides to reach out to the only person who might. So then we cut big title card, Hell's Kitchen, where Matt Murdock is wrapping up for the night in the office. Of course, Charlie Cox is back, and he says goodbye to two cameos from Karen Page and Foggy Nelson. And he's walking home at night when Spider Man swings up to meet him. But as he swings up, Matt swiftly dodges and punches him and uses his momentum to swing him around into a nearby bush and gets into a battle position. And Spider Man, he's just like, like, what the hell, like, whatever, put in some funny line like, man, you really are a good lawyer, just like to talk about that line from No Way Home. um and Matt recognizes him as Spider-Man, and then Spider-Man basically says that he needs his help, and Matt asks, oh, so you finally decided to team up. And Peter's confused at what he means, and Matt's like, let me show you what I mean. So Matt takes him back to his studio apartment, and he reveals his Daredevil costume to Spider-Man and is like, I was waiting for you to call. And he asks for that trust back, like mutual. So Peter unmasks and claims that they've met before, but Matt doesn't remember it, of course. So Peter explains that he thinks he stumbled onto something big happening in the streets of New York City and mentions what the cops said. Matt reveals that he's been slowly trying to take down the Maggia crime family and find out their godfather, like who like the head is. But he tells him that he knows who the kingpin is, that it's Wilson Fisk, the mayoral candidate, which Peter finds hard to believe because on the surface he's such a, like a socialite, well-known figure. And Matt relates how he's faced him before, but Fisk's influence goes so deep that he's yet to successfully take him in and make any charges stick. And he provides some exposition on how when Fisk was basically trying to collect mob families like Infinity Stones, the Maggia family was the biggest and the boldest, and they were the ones that were the biggest holdouts. They were able to stick their own, and Fisk couldn't get them. But during the snap, basically a bunch of Maggia people got snapped away, including Silvermane. And so that provided a lot of the ability for Fisk to try and weaken the Maggia as much as possible and almost take them over. So now that he snapped back, the blip happened, the Maggia are trying to regain lost ground and protect themselves from being totally consumed by Fisk. So Matt offers to help, and the two agree to team up. Then we cut to Silvermane back in his penthouse, who receives the news that Gargan's prison break attempt was successful, but then Spider-Man ruined it, and Tombstone and Hammerhead are being booked in jail, and Gargan is unaccounted for. He doesn't take that news well, but as he speaks, in the background, his two guards on the balcony are taken out viciously by something off screen. Silvermane and his henchmen go to check it. Another henchman go to check it out, only for Gargan to come up and reveal himself with the singular tentacle, now his mechanical scorpion tail, with a sharp edge coming out of his spine. It is now one with him and one with his nervous system. So Silvermane is all like, what the hell happened to you? And Gargan replies that he feels better than ever. And Silvermane says that he wants to put him to use to kill Wilson Fisk and then kill Spider-Man. Gargan pledges that he'll do it for free and he won't rest until he has stabbed Spider-Man through the chest and pulled his heart out. So, the next day at class, Peter shows up to his AI robotics class. He sees Theo, and Theo's sort of hurt about what happened with Gwen, and also that Peter just left the party, and there's a little bit of rift in their personal relationship there. And it's especially awkward when he meets with Gwen in the next class, because remember, they're lab partners. And so later that night, Peter and Matt stake out a known magia compound. The two break in. Peter's impressed by Matt's Daredevil skills and powers in action, and Daredevil finds one of the henchmen for Silvermane. They take him to the rooftop, and he starts to take things a little too far in his interrogation, and Peter gets uncomfortable because of Daredevil's methods. They find out that Silvermane is really Silvio Manfredi, of the New York City-based shipping industrialist Manfredi fortune, and he's planning a big assault to finish off Kingpin at his upcoming fundraiser ball. And Daredevil knocks him unconscious and leaves him bloodied up. And Peter basically is like, "What was that all about? Why'd you do all that? You bloodied him up. You did this, blah blah blah." And Matt basically lectures a hesitant Peter and says that he went straight from saving cats out of trees to fighting aliens in space, living a glamorous life with the Avengers, and he totally missed out this part in the middle, like defending the streets. And so he doesn't know what, you know, basically a whole thing about how he just went to live with the Avengers and got to live this big, heroic, glorious life saving universes. And so he kind of has lost touch with what it means to be like a friendly neighborhood Spider Man, like fighting crime at the street level. So the duo ultimately decide that they're going to infiltrate the ball and keep Fisk. Well, I guess that's like the end of my act two. So, okay, that's the act two. We're two-thirds there. They're going to infiltrate the ball that
Uh,
Fisk is holding.
I have a quick clarification question because if you said it, I missed it. Is Theo somebody we've seen before? Is this a comic book character, or is this just someone you made up?
I will plead the fifth on that one.
Okay, so the me not knowing Theo is most likely because I just haven't read the comics.
Is if someone was really familiar with the comics, they would probably get this, but I will refrain until it is finished.
Okay, coolio. That's fine. I just was totally lost on the Theo part, and I wasn't sure if I was supposed to get it. It sounds like I am supposed to get it, and I'm just not going to, which is fine. I'll wait till you give the big reveal. Other than that, so far everything sounds good. I like the Daredevil Spider-Man team up. If I'm not mistaken, don't they team up in the comics often? Like, isn't that a popular, or I shouldn't say often, isn't there like a popular storyline where Spider-Man and Daredevil team up?
No, I'd say it happens often. It happens pretty frequently. It's sort of like a Daredevil or Deadpool Wolverine thing. They team up pretty frequently. They have like a very fun relationship.
Okay, cool. I knew I had seen it before, so that's why I pulled back on the often because I realized since I haven't read a lot of the comics, for all I know, it only happened like 3 times or something. But okay, so that is cool that they that you're bringing that to life. I like the theme of him like skipping a step. It almost gives me the vibe of like, you were doing your due, kind of trying to make your way through college, and then just like stumble bass backwards into your dream job, and you don't have to do the middle part.
Right.
So I get
Exactly.
that sounds fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the main point I really would want to address thematically, like especially with like the when he's trying to find out the magia, where it's like before he comes to Matt for help, like this moment of like, I fought like, I literally fought giant purple aliens and saved the universe and all this stuff, but I have no idea how to find out who the head of this mafia organization is. Like skipping over that step, like you said, and yeah, just like him not having Karen and not having an AI in his head, and not having the Iron Spider suit, like just having to go back to the basics. And
it
he did skip that step because, like, even in Civil War, he really says he's only just like, we see him like stopping someone stealing a bike or like stopping a bus from crashing into people. He's never really fought like just street level thugs, really.
It's definitely interesting because I think it's a good thing to focus on for character development. I don't know if I could see the MCU doing it, but that's not necessarily a bad thing on your part. I really like that you're exploring that. I just have this weird feeling that they would just not explore that.
Yeah, no, I actually really quick side tangent that's somewhat relevant. I did see today that with Spider-Man 4, they're still sort of in like the actual Spider-Man 4, they're still in like the script writing phase. And
Hmm.
Marvel and Sony are like splitting the rights, so they have to come to an agreement on things and like Sony gets final say.
Yeah.
Um, Apparently basically Disney is trying to do this basically like street level and Sony is like no, we got to bring back Toby and Andrew again. Like they want like a team up movie for Spider-Man 4. So like Sony wants that because they're dumb and they don't understand anything. And Disney surprisingly is the voice of reason being like, well, we should bring it down to street level.
It is interesting because I would assume that they are seeing the numbers of the more recent MCU projects. And since didn't No Way Home, isn't it like the seventh highest grossing movie ever or something? Like, isn't it pretty high?
Made like almost $2 billion.
So I would assume that they are banking on putting butts in seats if Andrew and Toby come back, and that's where their head is. They're only caring about the money.
That's it. They just have dollar signs for eyes.
um, Interesting. Wasn't there, I apologize for sticking with your tangent for a second. Wasn't there talks of doing like a Tom Maguire, Andrew Garfield, like buddy cop Spider-Man show?
Yeah, well, not a show, but I've heard that they would basically do like a live action Spider-Verse movie where they like team up for some sort of thing across the multiverse or in someone's universe.
It's like I mentioned, I haven't watched the MCU stuff, but I would probably do a butt in seat for a live action Spider-Verse. Although to be fair, I'd watch Spider-Man 4. But I'm just putting it out there. Their money ploy would at least work with me.
I mean, me too. I'm still there day one regardless, but um yeah. Anyway, okay. Finishing out with my act 3, the big finale. Okay, so the duo ultimately decide that they're going to infiltrate Fisk's fundraising event and keep Fisk from being killed, but also try and quote unquote catch the gun in Manfredi's hand. So since all the bigwigs of the city are, or since all the bigwigs in the city are going to be there, including Manfredi. So Matt is going to go as himself, given he's a pro bono attorney who works with a lot of charitable organizations, and Peter's just going to sneak in as like someone else. So they're like sneaking in, not in costume. So at the ball, Peter and Matt sneak in, and Fisk goes around. He greets people. Peter tries to blend in, but then he notices that Gwen and Theo are there. They notice him and ask him why he's here, and Peter tries to get himself out of an obvious lie. And when he asks why they're here, it is revealed that Gwen's father, George, is the captain of a Manhattan precinct of the NYPD, and Theo is also there because of his father. So he tries to tell them that they need to leave to
Is
avoid.
his father Norman Osborn?
I will plead the Fifth Amendment on
Okay,
this.
sorry, you can continue. That just dinged in my head. I forgot about that from earlier. Sorry.
He tries to tell them they need to leave to avoid danger, and he's trying not to look suspicious, but he's like, "You guys can't be here." And they're like, "What do you mean?" Whatever, because they don't know he's Spider-Man. And then his spider sense goes off again, and a rumbling is heard. And then the Scorpion, in full, not necessarily full costume, but like full look, barges in, and he just starts knocking people over, slicing people up left and right. A little too bloody for the MCU, but just in my mind. And he goes right for Fisk. But Peter quickly suits up and stops Scorpion's tail from stinging Fisk right at the last second. Like he holds the tail from like slicing into him. And Gargan says, like, perfect. Now I finally get to kill. Like I just wanted to kill you. So like, I was only doing this to like root you out. And the two have this epic fight. They fight in the bar. I didn't want to go into into like too much specifics, but just imagine like a 10-minute fight in the ballroom and then it leaks out into the streets and they're just fighting all over the place. And as they fight, a whole onslaught of armed assailants working for the Magia enter, and they just start blasting Fisk's crew, who return with their own firepower, and it's sort of goon on goon army on goon army. And pretty soon, the streets look like an absolute war zone, with both sides just unleashing automatic firepower at each other and causing complete chaos. Matt, now suited up as Daredevil, does the best he can to defeat a lot of the gunmen while Peter takes care of Scorpion, but it becomes quickly out of his control. So Peter and Scorpion are fighting. Scorpion's tail cuts and slashes Peter pretty badly. He starts to bleed, his suit's all sliced up. Eventually, though, he gets the upper hand. He grabs the tail and uses it basically to like slice itself in half. So he essentially severs it from Gargan and renders him useless. Spider-Man and Daredevil then tag team the remaining mob men in epic fashion, and eventually Spider-Man has Manfredi and officially puts him under arrest as the police take him in. And Fisk cleans himself off and is aided by the police, and him and Daredevil have a sort of standoff because, like Matt said before, he knows Fisk is guilty, but the public doesn't view so. And so basically, the police are escorting mayoral candidate Fisk out. Him and Daredevil sort of share a look, and Daredevil kind of whispers next time to him and then takes off. So at a church rooftop nearby, Matt and Peter debrief, and Matt basically tells Peter he might be just as good at this friendly neighborhood Spider-Man stuff as he was this Avengers stuff, and says if he needs help at any time, just give him a call as he's continuing to build his case to take down Fisk once and for all, and he leaps off the roof to go back to Hell's Kitchen. The next day at school, Peter meets up with Gwen and Theo before class, asks them if they are okay, about the night before, and, gives them an excuse for where he went. And as they're talking, a man approaches the group, and Theo introduces him to Peter as his father and says, "You guessed it, Peter, meet my father, Norman." The man extends his hand and says, "You can call me Mr. Osborn." Peter is completely caught off guard. The music begins to swell and he stammers. And the man says, "My boy Harry here doesn't seem to want anything to do with me anymore. That's why he takes his mother's maiden name and uses his middle name." Anyway, he's got to get going. He's running a new startup focusing on superhuman performance enhancers. And he should come by sometime because Harry says he's pretty bright in science and they're always looking for fresh meat for interns, and offers him his business card. And his business card has a big green Oscorp logo. And then the movie ends. So, really big deep dive to just completely mislead the audience. Very famously, his mother's maiden name is Lyman in the comics, and his middle name is Theophilus. And so I'm having it where it's a big red herring, but at the same time, it's like a relationship where he doesn't like his father, and so he goes by his maiden name and his middle name. But he is technically the MCU Harry Osborn this whole time.
Okay.
And then I have a mid-credit scene and a post-credit scene.
Okay.
So in the mid-credit scene, we see Wilson Fisk at the hospital with his wife Vanessa, making her recovery. Fisk himself was being treated for some of the wounds he sustained at his ball. And Wesley tells him that the entire Magia family heads, including Manfredi, have been arrested at this point. And basically, New York City crime is now officially his for the taking. And he basically is going to own it all after today. So, should be a sign of celebration, but he basically says that there's one order of business he still needs to attend to. He gets on his cell phone and he calls a number and he says, "Sergey, I need you to come to New York. It's time for the Craven to hunt." He says as he holds up a picture on the front page of the Daily Bugle portraying Spider-Man. Then, in my post-credit scene, I meant to include a scene before, so just rewind for a second. In the cleanup of the ball, damage control take Gargan, who's still alive, but it's because he still has that like Doc Ock tentacle and whatever, so he's still like superhuman-y, so they took him in. So pretend that we saw that happen. So in a post-credit scene, we see a medical lab environment where a group of scientists at damage control have Mac Gargan unconscious at an operating table. one of the scientists reveals who the patient is. You know how like doctors have that thing where they're like, "Oh, patient is Matt Gargan, age whatever, blah blah blah,"
Mhm.
and they say they are now going to begin the human trials using specimen 299A found in Mexico. And it's revealed to be the sample of the Venom symbiote that was left behind by Eddie Brock in Mexico in the post-credit scene of No Way Home,
Mhm.
because Mac Gargan becomes Venom in the comics.
Yeah, that
And
I did know.
I think doing a Venom, like it would be worth it to do Venom in the symbiote, but with the Tom Hardy movies also happening, they might want to stray from making it Eddie Brock. So I think making him Mac Gargan or maybe more like an Agent Venom would work in the MCU. So anyway, Spider-Man Gang Wars coming to a theater near you.
um. Okay. A couple things. First, if I remember correctly, didn't you say that the Sonyverse is separate from the MCU, but also completely canon to the MCU at the same time?
Both is and is not canon. It really is.
So
It
that
kind of is both.
would Craven be Aaron Taylor Johnson? I guess is the better question.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. Depending on how the Craven movie goes, that depends
There
on
you
my
go.
answer, or that changes my answer.
Okay. Um, Next question. Who do you think will be removed from the MCU first, Loki or Wilson Fisk?
I mean, Loki. Wait, you mean like just like not following the character anymore, or like will physically die?
I just the I obviously really like Wilson Fisk. I only have seen him in the 3 seasons of Daredevil. I know he's back. I think he was in Hawkeye. I know he's in Echo. He's Vincent D'Onofrio is awesome. It's just like if they're gonna just continue with Fisk like they've can. I'm sorry, Loki's technically dead, but then they pull him out of the past, and then that's how Loki season 1 and 2 happen, right?
Yes, it's like an alternate timeline version of the character.
So then, yeah, that's why I guess I should have said which character do you think the MCU will choose to stop using first in any capacity? Because it feels
Probably
like those are the
Loki.
two. It feels like those are the two villains who are just going to be around in like Phase 10.
Yeah, but to that point though, like I understand that, but to that point though, I feel like that's just kind of like what the purpose of like a lived in universe is, like from a comics perspective, where like these characters are always around, you know? Like one of the big mistakes in like the movies, like I get why they have to do it, but like in the movies, it's like they have one villain at a time and then they get killed off until the next villain that's one at a time and then they get killed off. Whereas in the comics, it's like a whole universe where they're constantly around, you know what I mean?
Oh, definitely. Have you seen Echo?
I have not watched Echo yet, but it is on my list for sure.
Can I spoil one thing?
Go for it. Wait, have you seen
So,
Echo?
kind of. I didn't finish it because I didn't like it, but I started it.
Okay, yeah, hit me.
So I did not know this, but I guess in Hawkeye, Echo shoots Wilson Fisk in the face, and he's supposed to be dead, but he shows up just completely alive with no eye. If that makes
Mhm.
sense, like it clearly went into his head, and he just lived. So that's kind of just fresh in my mind, which is why I asked that question. And I would assume in this, he would also be fine, maybe with more scars from other stuff that happens. I don't know.
Something like that. Maybe he's even missing the eye to make everything work, but it's like little details like that.
Yeah, that was just I didn't know that they literally quote unquote killed him in Hawkeye and then he just came back in Echo. I didn't watch Hawkeye. I don't know how it ends, but that was a big negative I was reading online was that I guess it was implied he died in Hawkeye. I didn't watch Hawkeye.
And if you believe some of the rumors, actual Spider-Man 4 is going to follow a very much similar path to this and have Wilson Fisk and Charlie Cox and stuff like that.
Hey, I'm all for it. The other thing was so at the beginning, I know I don't. So you said I know that part of what you were talking about was that he really just is not good at his job. However, and maybe you can clarify this for me. If Theo's at that gala because his father is also a prominent figure and his father is revealed to be Norman Osborn, wouldn't that mean that he was a prominent figure in the city, and then by proxy, it would have been much easier for Peter to find him on the wall?
Yes, no, I literally thought about that and I have no answer.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were
It's
just
just a
truly trying to say that he was a terrible detective.
no. Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just more for the allure. It's admittedly just more for the to make the reveal impactful. It would definitely be like a pitch meetings thing where it would
Okay.
make sense, but I just wanted to be able to like give that reveal. I don't know how maybe in like another sequel, like in a Spider-Man 5, when they actually used Norman Osborn, they could like make up something. I don't know.
Get all the way off my back about that one.
Yes. Oh no, here's what it was. Norman Osborn really wanted his friends to get into MIT, so he had Doctor Strange make everyone forget who he was.
Oh man, that'd be good. Yeah, other than that, really liked it, everything throughout. And I promise me making the Loki Fisk joke was nothing against um the I really like D'Onofrio, I like Fisk, and you make a good point. That's how comics work. The characters continue to stay and whatnot. But yeah, so otherwise, I really liked it. I like that, at least from what I took out of it, maybe it was different in your head. I like that Scorpion takes a more prominent role. I was upset that he just kind of appeared in Homecoming and then has relatively not appeared again. I feel like that's something that's a miss, but like you said, it sounds like they're gonna do stuff with Scorpion, which is cool because I don't know. It's kind of like how they set up Prowler and then just did nothing with it. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, I went with the whole severed tentacle thing, but like I know Marvel doesn't, maybe I'm just a prophet because I know Marvel doesn't do, they don't typically like waste things. And I remember watching No Way Home not too long ago, and they made very careful note that like his tentacle gets sliced off and then it's just never addressed again. And I'm like, that's a very advanced piece of like alternate universe technology. Like, I just felt like there had to be something there, unless it really was just like an in passing thing. But I just had a hard time thinking that because I was like, they just made very careful intention to show you that one of his tentacles got chopped off.
No, I think you're right. I think even we talked about that after seeing the movie. I don't know if I think we theorized at the time that that would be Scorpions. Kind of like, if I remember correctly, isn't Vulture's stuff the tech from the leftover aliens from Avengers?
Yes, yeah, the Chitauri tech.
There we go. I never would remember that name. Um, so yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, and I like that it ties into the universe. Now, I don't actually know the answer to this question. Um, in the comics, is his tail a part of a suit? Is it an additive, or does he actually have like a mutant tail?
It's always like mechanic. Well, I mean, obviously there's exceptions, like certain storylines, but like mainstream, it's like part of like a suit, like an attachment.
Okay.
Like he has the suit and he has the arm. I think some versions, like more modern versions, are like how I have it, where it's like it is like Doctor Octopus's tentacles, where it's like grafted into his spine. But like early on, like his original appearance, it's just like a suit, like with the tail as like a extra limb, like imagine just like if they like an Iron Man type suit, but it just has a prehensile tail.
Okay. My only experience with Scorpion is in the Spider-Man 1 video game for the GameCube, so that's why I was curious. In that one, he wears like a rhino style suit and just has a tail, and it at least was implied to me as a kid that it was like a part of his body. I never really thought much about it.
Yeah. But yeah, and just the last thing I wanted to say about this, I really wanted to like make it where it still definitely was in the MCU, but still kept him in this sort of pocket universe.
Hmm.
Because that's a big part in the comics where it's like Spider-Man especially has his own like little micro universe within the Marvel universe where like his characters and himself they tend to keep to themselves, but there's still those like crossovers or references that he's still part of the larger universe, but he still very much has his like mini microcosm, if that makes sense.
Definitely, and I really respect that. I really like the Spider-Man trilogy in the MCU. I think my only real gripe is how he is basically an MCU product. He doesn't get a chance to really shine as his own person, and like the world that he's in gets kind of overtaken by the MCU stuff. So it even still with that, and you touched on it in your. I feel like one of your main themes was touching on that, where like you said, he can't really function without Iron Man because he's just so used to it. So I did appreciate that. I remember, and it sounds like this isn't the case anymore, which is a good thing. But I remember reading a report that they were debating just completely scrapping the whole no one can remember Peter thing, and like it was going to be all for nothing, and MJ was just going to automatically remember who he was, and I was, oh, that's not good. I don't like that.
Yeah, no, I did not want to do. I wanted to stay faithful to the continuity.
I like it. I like it. Very solid. I would definitely go and see this. It sounds pretty good. I like it.
Thank you, thank you. All right, now I am ready for yours.
Okay, so I'm also pitching a movie that is currently in development. I am pitching the Blade movie, and if I remember correctly, there was already a script for this, and they had already been filming it, but it was so terrible that they scrapped it, and they're remaking it. And I know they brought in Nico last name, the guy who wrote True Detective. He's so I'm excited for that one because he's a pretty good writer. So hopefully, what we actually get is better than the rumors for the old one. But here's mine. If I haven't said on the podcast before, kind of like you with Spider-Man, the original Blade trilogy is one of my favorite trilogies of all time. I love the movies. I will always take a chance to watch them. And when you originally pitched us doing this podcast, I had never really thought about how I would do a Blade movie. So this was actually really fun for me because I was like, well, I've always loved the character. I've always loved the universe. What would I do? And so I think I made a pretty solid movie. There are certain points where I made a concerted effort to try and link it in with the MCU. I would say I had an idea for what I wanted for the movie. Then I went back and added stuff where I could to be Easter eggy. So that is probably you'll be able to tell where it's like, oh, Jacob definitely wanted to link that with the MCU, that kind of thing. But otherwise, I think I got a pretty solid story. Mine is 110% R-rated. If I'm not mistaken, Deadpool 3 is the first R-rated Disney movie they'll be doing. In my opinion, Blade should be R-rated as well. This is a movie about vampires killing other vampires. There are humans, there are blood. I feel like this should not be anything under an R, so just want to put that out there. When I mention kills and stuff, imagine it's as bloody as you want. Go to town in your brain. My director is Tommy Wirkola, who has done Dead Snow, Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, What Happened to Monday, and then most recently, Violent Night. I just think that for what I would want out of the Blade character and the fight sequences, I think he does a really good job with cinematography and the way that he works the camera. In a lot of his movies, he has a good, not the whole time, but he has a way of creating some very creative scenes. And also, he's a relatively no-name director, and I like picking those. So went with Wirkola. When I introduce certain characters, I will be saying who I cast as them. I only cast the main characters. So yeah, here we go. Also, I know you split yours into 3 acts. When I was looking through this, I think it's just going to be best if I do it in 2 halves. So I'll stop halfway through, we'll discuss, and then I'll keep going.
Okay.
All right.
That's fine. Works.
Now with all of that out of the way, here we go. The movie opens with us seeing Old Man Blade running through an alley. It is nighttime and it's raining. We're really setting the scene here. People are chasing him. We see some fun jumping sequences. Kind of just imagine the cameras moving and you see like some shadows and you definitely see Blade and you see a lot of stuff behind him. Like people are just bearing down on him like as fast as possible. Eventually, he gets onto a rooftop and he's cornered. Like he is completely surrounded by people just standing around Blade. As their leader, Pilu Asbak, who, if you don't know, he's been playing the villain in a lot of stuff. I just recently saw him in Hidden Strike. He's in Samaritan. He's in Overlord. He was in Run, Sweetheart, Run. That's about as far as my memory is going to go at the moment, but he's been in other stuff. And he begins to speak. about how Blade's surrounded, and he's just going to give like that classic villain speech that the villains give when they're like, "Oh, I'm so confident that, it's 50-1 right now. There's no way that you have any chance of getting out of this." And then Blade will utter a quip about how they should have brought more men. And then this is when we see him turn around and he does his signature smile as an epic fight begins with the people on the rooftop. So I wanted to kind of go similar to an opening like Blade from 1998, where it's just right off the bat, you're going to know exactly what you're in for. So imagine like a 10-minute fight sequence. I mean, he's taken on 50 people at once. And yeah, so that's how it starts. And then, of course, at the end of it, he's defeated everybody. And he's even defeated Pilu. But then he hears a slow clapping behind him. Like one of those haha kind of things. And then a man begins to talk about how this is the strongest one he's seen yet. And this will be his favorite kill. And that's when Blade turns to reveal his first full shot of him in his traditional outfit. However, he is not Mahershala Ali. He is Denzel Washington. Denzel then responds to the man, revealed to be played by Liev Schreiber, and they discuss what he means by the strongest one. There's going to be a little bit of like Easter egg dropping, or I should say, like, we're going to sprinkle a little bit to where if you're paying attention, you'll be like, wait, what does that mean? I didn't write the exact specifics, but it's kind of giving a little hint to what Liev's plan is. But then he's going to go, oh, darn. Oh, I've said too much. I've gone too far. But it won't matter. You'll be dead soon anyway. Imagine Liev. I feel like he would deliver this in a very good way. And then that's when Blade lunges at his attacker, but every single move is countered to a T. Imagine he's throwing punches, he's throwing kicks, and Liev is just like effortlessly bowing out of all of them. He's not even getting a scratch on him. I would say imagine kind of like Equalizer-esque style of fighting with probably some cool slow-mo mixed in to really emphasize how like Blade's close, but he's not hitting him. And then I also am imagining for a lot of these fight sequences, kind of like Deadpool-esque POVs, where the camera will like move throughout different parts of the body at different points. And that's not just for this fight scene, that's for all of them. Kind of like I said, I really want to emphasize the strength and the power of a lot of the characters who are fighting. And as you know me, I'm going to put a lot of emphasis into that the fight sequences are good. And so, whether there's swords, bullets, Blade's weapons. So as all the vampires are getting killed, just imagine it looks cool. And so at that point, he hasn't been able to lay anything, and Liev's like, my turn. And he doesn't actually say that, but like imagine that. And then he goes at Blade. Blade does not block any shots. And so Denzel's on the ground. He's badly beaten. And the rain is mixing with his blood in a shot where we see Liev walking towards him and squatting next to his face. And Blade pulls out a secret blade from his wrist and goes to surprise Liev, who then grabs Blade's arm and says, have a good rest, Daywalker. Then he stabs the blade from his wrist directly into Blade's mouth. Imagine kind of like Jenna Ortega's kill at the end of Scream 6. And at that moment, as we see the life leave from Denzel's face, title card. Okay, so then after we get the Blade title card, we open on a historic-looking building. We see a group of 3 people stealing some artifacts of value. You can tell they aren't trained. They stumble around and they're loud and much louder than they should be. It almost looks like maybe they're in a museum or some place where artifacts are being collected. After leaving, they return to a hideout in an abandoned construction site. Then we see their leader, who is also revealed to be played by Pilu Asbek. He's rooting around through what they got, and he is super pissed because it, quote unquote, is not there. His underlings are so confused because they got this huge haul that can be sold off for so much money. And they're like, why is boss unhappy? And Pilu explains that he wants something more than money. He wants unlimited power. He goes on this rant explaining the legend of the ebony sword and how it grants immortality as well as protection against magic, and he'll go through this whole spiel about everything about the ebony sword, or at least what is known through myth and legend. And as he finishes, Blade starts laughing behind him. He goes on a rant about how vampires need to stop trying to become stronger than him. He beat their ruler, and now this power vacuum is laughable. And no one can beat him, so they all should just return to normal life so he won't be forced to kill them. And this is like supposed to be. Actually, I'll explain that in a second. Of course, the group does not agree at all. They're these young dudes who are just ready for a fight. And another big fight sequence happens. So now we get to see this Blade fight. And I have to emphasize that Mahershala will fight very different from Denzel. Of course, he also still wins. He defeats the vampires. The only one he doesn't kill is Pilu, because Pilu surrenders. And Blade's like, oh, haha, this guy's accepting his fate. He knows better, and just thinks nothing of it. And then after Pilu is turned over to the authorities, there will be something that happens. But real quick, I just want to give the background I was about to earlier. So the way that this universe is set up is, in the comics, Deacon Frost is very different from the character we got in 1998. And so what I wanted to do was, Deacon Frost is like the head of all the vampires. He's the head of like the vampire clan at the time in the MCU. Blade trains to defeat him in an attempt to stop, like at that time the vampires were evil, and so he kills Deacon Frost, and instead of it being like a Hydra situation where another head took his place and they continued, instead when he took out Deacon, everybody scattered. And so there's all of these different sects and sort of hives of vampires. Some are good, some are evil. This will play a part later, but the point is that there's all these power vacuums going on where there's different younger vampires who are like, well, now that Deacon's gone, because in the comics Deacon's is this old dude, and so they're like, the old guard's gone, now I can take over. And another one's like, no, I can take over. And since they're so self-focused on like themselves instead of working together, nobody ever actually does it. So all the vampires are unorganized, and it's just not a good day for vampires. And so that's kind of the setup to this universe.
A clarification question.
Yeah.
So is Pilu's not Deacon?
No, he's not.
Okay. That was my clarification question.
Yeah, no worries. That works. So at this point, Blade returns to his home, which is in an old cave in the mountains of Latveria. So this is one of the parts I wanted to put in a little Easter egg. In the comics, Blade's dad is from there, and I wanted to leave it open as like an Easter egg for Feige to have some fun, maybe teasing Doom, or maybe it's just Latverius. Then the fans are like, oh, Doom's here somewhere. He can go to town with that. In one of the future movies I was thinking about, I'd want to do Blade's dad because it's a fun story from the comics that they never explored. Well, that they never explored in the original trilogy, so that's just a cool little thing. And also, I need to emphasize that this version of Blade is old. He's jaded. It's one of those things where, like, you know, he's living by himself because he wants to be alone, and that's like his happy place is just solitude, and I don't want to say chilling and depression, but he's just happy like that. So before I continue on, that's kind of the halfway point, a little bit before half, but that's probably the best place to stop before I start rolling with the rest of the movie.
So in the comics, is he like, I was always confused with the half vampire thing. Was it actually he was just a normal human? His mom was normal. It's just she got bit when she was
Yeah,
pregnant
so
and had these abilities.
Yeah, so in actual mythology, a Dampier is a daywalker who has half vampire, half human blood, and it is told through myth that the Dampier is the strongest and it can take down even the head of vampire clans. And so I don't know who created Blade, but I believe the original Marvel writer who created Blade was using that as like inspiration, because a Dampier is technically a real thing in mythology, but that's the Blade is that he's the daywalker. And yeah, he was Blade's dad had already impregnated his mom, and then Deacon Frost bit his mom. He pops out with super blood.
I really like the universe establishing so far. I think that Blade, I'm not familiar, other than just the trilogy of movies. I'm not familiar with the comic universe, but I really like what you're doing with like building out this whole like vampire civil war, like sex and hives. vampires, like, after Deacon Frost is killed. I like that. I like how it really just fleshes out the universe, like of these underground vampires. I do want to ask this question, but not if it's going to spoil a revelation later on.
Okay.
Is like what time period is this in, like in the
Oh,
MCU?
I should have said that beforehand. Doesn't spoil anything. This all takes place pre that post credit scene in Eternals where he says, "Don't touch that."
So is this so Eternals took place after the snap and everyone got snapped back? So is that still in that time frame, or is
Yeah,
that a spoiler
so
for
I
later?
debated doing a story that revolved around being during the snap. However, it kind of complicated things. So this just takes place before that final post-credit scene. It has no tie-ins to the snap or not. I did not get as specific as far as actual years, but I will say that none of this is connected to the MCU as far as timeline altering. I specifically wanted to do something that because so I guess in my personal opinion, with when they were building out the MCU, I know that obviously they didn't know it was going to be awesome from the start and that they'd be able to add in all these characters. But one of the things that was always a little weird to me with some of them was, well, this guy clearly existed. How did you never know? How was he never mentioned? Kind of thing. So I wanted to create a way for Blade to have existed the entire time, even though he was never doing anything with the Avengers or any of the other characters, and then hopefully it would still make sense to fans. So, as far as timeline is concerned, it is just before that Easter egg. There's no mention to the snap or really any mention of any of the stuff that happens in the previous movies. And that's mainly because he's in a completely different country. He's trying to stay secluded. His thing is I'm old and I'm just gonna chill alone. Is like it's not that he probably wouldn't find out about it. He has no interest in searching for it.
Makes sense. That was all I had. That was all the questions that I had.
Okay. Cool. There's one I really assumed you'd ask about, but it's probably a good thing you did it because it'll get explained later. Um, okay.
Well, I'm
So
leaving the opening for later in terms of like I'm not gonna touch that until I get the revelations.
okay, cool. So that's good. Um, okay. So let's see here. I already mentioned about the trilogy. I mentioned, okay, so yeah, the point is that Blade is old, he's set in his ways, he spent his life building up to defeat Deacon Frost, and now that he has, it's almost that empty feeling. I kind of wanted to play with the idea of those themes of like, uh, 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 the main character, so like as an example, Rick on Rick and Morty has been trying for 7 years of showtime, and of course longer on the show, to destroy evil Rick, and then he finally does, and he has this empty feeling of like, oh crap, well I've devoted my whole life to doing this, so what happens now? I have nothing else to achieve, kind of thing. So he's not going to be depressed, so to speak, but it's almost like he became one with the depression, if that makes sense. Like he's thriving in that role. And so I basically just wrote that he no longer really cares about the world. He's grown bitter. Uh, kind of will be explained in that little opening dialogue. And also, I wrote stuff will happen to show this, but I didn't go that deep. I did want to point out that I tried to make this a pseudo bottle story, and that'll be explained here in a second. But the point is that I really wanted to explore the psychology of Blade, and so uh, we'll learn all of this stuff about the state of his mind, and then eventually he is visited by an older man, Wesley Snipes Blade. Wesley explains to him that a power beyond his comprehension is coming to kill him, and they need to work together to stop him. And I would imagine there'd be some scene where we've established Blade's cycle of how he lives in this cave, and then all of a sudden this old guy shows up and he's like, he goes to kill him. How'd you find me? No one knows where I live. And he's like, I know because I'm you, or whatever. And so going back to the someone's coming to kill him and they have to work together. Wesley knows this because he's experienced it firsthand. And that's when we get a flashback where we get to find out what happened to Wesley Snipes after the end of the trilogy. He's actually in the same situation as Ali is in. Ryan Reynolds, Hannibal King is dead. Jessica Biel, Baby Whistler's dead. He's grown old. He's grown bitter. He has no one. His life expectancy is insanely long compared to humans. And so we get Old Man Blade, who's had to, if you remember in that original trilogy, he was also the lone soldier. That's like a key part of Blade. However, he eventually learns to have this pseudo family. So he gets close to them, and then he has to watch them die, and he has to experience what it's like to lose them. And so Wesley has grown old. He's experiencing, or he has already experienced what Ali is currently experiencing. So there's going to be that parallel there. At this point in the flashback, Wesley Snipes' Blade is visited by a Blade played by Lawrence Fishburne. I'm sorry.
You just googled black male actors in their no, I'm just joking.
Real quick, now that I've revealed Lawrence Fishburne, one of the biggest Easter eggs about the original Wesley Snipes' Blade is that before Wesley Snipes got the job, Denzel Washington and Lawrence Fishburne were approached to play the role, but they both turned it down, and then Wesley Snipes said, "I'll do it." So I thought it would be cool if for the other universe's Blades, if I did an Easter egg for the fans who would know that we get to finally see Denzel as Blade for all those who wanted it in 98, and we get to finally see Lawrence Fishburne as Blade for all those who wanted it in 98. So that's purely just supposed to be an Easter egg for the people who knew that.
Okay, one more quick question. Was that Blade TV series, like, is that supposed to be the Wesley Snipes Blade, or is that a complete different continuity?
No, it's not. To my knowledge, it's not canon. I guess when I watched it was before all the MCU multiverse stuff, so maybe it's been made canon, but to my knowledge, it's not canon.
Does that factor into it at all?
No, I actually didn't touch the TV show at all.
Okay, no further questions.
So, still in the flashback, Lawrence Fishburne Blade has approached Wesley Snipes, and he explains everything. So essentially, we're now going to learn about who Liev Schreiber is. Liev Schreiber is Draconis, who is a famous Blade villain from the comics. Draconis was raised purely to kill Blade by the vampires in Lawrence's universe. When he went after Lawrence, Lawrence was defeated, and in a last-ditch effort, he escaped into another universe. Unfortunately, this was a huge mistake, because Draconis had no idea about the multiverse. He had no idea he could travel anywhere other than where he was living. And now he needs to know how to do that. So in the comics, Draconis is like this high priest of the dark arts kind of thing, but he's really just a vampire hunter. So I thought it would be an interesting idea, especially because of some of the stuff you were telling me with WandaVision, where what if Draconis essentially chilled in a hut for a little bit and learned like all the ways to just traverse the multiverse. He gets this sort of higher level of understanding, not just about.
He could use the Darkhold. The Darkhold is the book in Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness that like teaches you this multiverse magic.
Boom. Go for it. He's using the Darkhold, and it's that version of the book from Lawrence Fishburne's universe. So he uses that, and that's like his priestly Bible, we shall say. So essentially, by learning how to travel the multiverse, he ends up becoming way more powerful than he was originally supposed to be, because like I said, he was just supposed to be trained to be the Blade killer by the vampires, and now he's much farther than that. He also decided that in his quest for power, instead of just killing one Blade, he wanted to kill them all. His purpose was to kill Blade, so now he's going to serve his ultimate purpose and rid every universe of their Blades. And so, Draconis has been traveling from universe to universe to universe, killing every universe's Blades. That's what happened at the beginning. We saw Denzel Washington die. In this flashback, we are now going to see Lawrence Fishburne warning Wesley, and then Lawrence Fishburne is going to die, and that's kind of the setup. And so this all spawned from, I really thought it'd be a cool idea if Wesley Snipes was Mahershala Ali's Whistler in this movie. I think that would be a really cool Easter egg, so to speak, if they just cast him as Whistler in the new one or whatnot. I wanted him to be the real Snipes from the trilogy, so I evolved it. But also, fun fact, Whistler was not originally from the comics. He actually has a Harley Quinn uh, uh, start where apparently he was created for, I think it said, the X-Men TV show and then put into the comics. I did not know that until I started doing research for this. So that's just a fun fact. So from here, uh, we have what I was talking about earlier. We have this bottle story where essentially I imagine it as they're going to be training together. Ali's going to slowly learn to be less bitter, and he's going to learn to accept. He's going to learn to accept help, and the it's it. I envision where it's one of those movies where there's a bunch of action at the beginning, there's going to be a bunch of action at the end, and then the middle's all of this story, all of this cool lore, all of the setup, because it's the first Blade movie, so I kind of want to drop a lot of stuff that gets you intrigued, stuff that's going to make you excited for later. At this point, this is where there's going to be one of those fire scenes where at the beginning it was just kind of implied that Lawrence's Blade was, he had to have been dead if he told Wesley, but now we're going to learn how he died. We're going to see this traumatic event that Wesley Snipes witnessed, and that's going to be another one of those bonding moments. A little bit more use of flashback. And then another note that I have here is, so it seemed like to me, from the way you explained the post-credit scene, that they're gearing up to have Midnight Suns, essentially, which in the comics is like MCU's version of Justice League Dark. And I also am just going to assume, because of that post-credit scene, that they're going to have Blade be the leader. So he needs to become this sort of all-powerful Batman-esque figure, like in Justice League Dark. So what I'm going to have him do is, in order to be able to train to eventually defeat Draconis, Wesley is going to essentially be teaching Blade. I called it the light arts. But it's more or less, he's not going to become magic or anything like that, but it's going to be this sort of I don't know how to exactly explain it. This is going to make sense. This is going to make sense a little later, so I'm just going to pause here at the moment. Let's see here. So he's going to learn to have all the knowledge that he needs to defeat Draconis, and this is going to explain why he knows what the Ebony Sword is and other artifacts that Marvel can Easter egg and have fun with. There's a lot of different Midnight Sun level crazy magic artifacts and whatnot, and in my mind they're setting up Blade to be that know-it-all. So this is going to be where he's learning and Wesley's teaching him, and then eventually this will all culminate in a final showdown with the three of them, in which of course Wesley will die, and that will give the strength to Blade to finally defeat Draconis. The way that I have this thought up is we're going to have this whole training montage where it seems like, Ali's come so far. He feels like he finally has a brother. They're going to have this huge connection, and that's why I want to take time to build it. I don't want it to seem like it's just a lackluster, they met for 10 minutes and then he dies kind of thing. That's why I wanted to give time to build their relationship. And so Draconis is like, haha, I'm here to kill you kind of thing, and you think it's going to work, and then it doesn't. Draconis overpowers them both. Ali's on the ground. Wesley's on the ground. Draconis is like, haha, you snuck away from me before. You're not going to sneak away twice. And he kills him. And then Ali's in a fit of rage, and he throws Draconis off. And we're going to have one of those classic where Wesley Snipes is like, oh, you're trained well kind of things. And then here's the key. So in the comics, Blade takes his serum because he does not want to drink the blood of humans. However, the way his powers work is if he actually drinks the blood of a human, he automatically becomes stronger than just all of the vampires. And so this is what I meant about the sort of light arts. I know that's a weird thing to call it because this is what I meant. I just didn't want to spoil it earlier. I don't think this has happened yet because I don't think there's another Dampier in actual Marvel, but in my world where there's a multiverse, Wesley says, drink my blood. And in this universe, since Ali didn't have a Whistler, to also show how smart he really is, he was able to make the serum himself instead of having a friend make it for him or like Whistler, like I said. And so he's used to using the serum, but Wesley says, drink my blood. And so like I said, if human blood makes Blade one of the strongest characters, imagine what Dampier blood would do. Because in theory, it's like 100 times stronger than normal human blood. So I literally wrote he'd go Super Saiyan. And so yeah, that's essentially it. Then we have that big final fight in which I personally like when uh the villains get the upper hands earlier, and then at the end the heroes get the upper hand on the villains, but in a similar way that pays homage to earlier. So I would imagine Draconis would come after Mahershala Ali, and then we'd get those slow-mo shots where Draconis keeps missing ever so slightly, and then Ali has that my turn moment, and then he just completely, I don't want to say brutally murders Draconis, but in my mind, since I feel like he would be more anti-hero, he would justify that Draconis would not be somebody who would need to live, especially because he's still, he was jaded, he was bitter for so long. He also kills like every vampire he comes in contact with. So I don't know if it needs justification, but he is going to kill Draconis. There will probably be some cool scene where either he catches on fire or just explodes. And then, da, 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 da. Okay, so now I'm just going to read the last part here because I wrote some additives that explain some more stuff. And then I also have some credit scenes. So, and yeah, that's basically it. It's designed to be a mostly bottle story with Ali and Wesley showing off their acting chops and touching on themes of loneliness, age, depression, power, and most importantly, the age-old feeling of the need to achieve something for someone else. In my mind, we'll also build some of Draconis' backstory in that he was bullied and completely assaulted by his vampire brethren, but that's what allowed him to channel his inner self and become who he is today. I like the idea of a bunch of drawings during the opening credits that looks like ancient comics, and they show Draconis being sad, then being reached by an older man that almost becomes like a father figure. Then he learns from him, and they have that sort of fatherly bond. Then him being killed by Blade, and Draconis being depressed until he's given the opportunity from these forefathers in the vampire ranks to allow him to take the opportunity of revenge. And then maybe it's not just that he must prove his worth by killing every Blade, but also he needs to take revenge on every timeline where Blade could potentially kill his father figure. I have this as an additive because I like this idea, but I didn't necessarily write it in. You can tell me what you think. And then, yeah, I don't know, just workshopping that one. And then here's my post-credit scene. The post-credit scene is Pilu breaking out of prison to finally get the ebony sword, and he gets a tip that it's in some old guy's mansion. If I remember correctly, you said that that's where Dane finds the sword. And essentially, there's a few people in the comics who have been consumed by its power. So since I don't have Pilu as a specific person I'm adapting, however, my goal is for Dane to see the negative effects, and that will kind of help him stay on the right path, because the point of the ebony sword is that it feeds off of the worst parts of you. And so like I imagine there's one character where he wields the ebony sword and he just gets engulfed in like this black flame, and like his power comes from just how evil of a person he is. And I believe they're doing the point of MCU for Black Knight is to become more of a hero, so I feel like that could be an interesting way to set up for like a character development. So I know I may have made it seem a little different earlier, but Pilu was more to be set up for some Black Knight development later, but I wanted somebody to be able to use the ebony sword. Once again, just kind of trying to tie it in to MCU stuff, especially because, like I said, Blade's gonna learn about all that stuff, and that's how he's gonna be like this Batman figure for the Midnight Suns. And then I said that. Okay. That's technically everything. The last part that I have here is I ended up making a pseudo outline for a full trilogy. So the last part is just where I have in mind of it going. But I don't necessarily have to add that. That was just for me to be able to flesh out this initial movie. So I know that last part was a lot, but what do you think?
Like I said, I really like the universe. I like adding that in to, like I was saying, sort of with Spider-Man, giving him like his own like microcosm. I really appreciated that, and having all this vampire lore, I feel like that's something that Blade as a character like specifically brings, just like with him. And so I think that you handled that definitely very well. I like the multiverse stuff. It's basically, Blade into the Blade verse. Um, with all those like deep cut Blade. I guess so. How did the other Blades get to the other universes?
Yeah, so that's probably my Norman Osborn pitch meeting because I am unaware of an instance that would have happened in the current MCU where like a random portal would have just opened. And in my mind, like I couldn't think of a storyline where Blade like learned of time travel or not time of multiverse travel and then used it. So I don't necessarily know how Lawrence Fishburne knows about it. Denzel Washington doesn't, but Lawrence Fishburne knew about the multiverse and was able to escape into it thinking he'd be safe from Draconis when instead he just fueled the fire. I don't have an explanation for how he knows about it. I couldn't find a story nor was I aware of something in the lore that I've read where I was able to answer that question.
Well, you see, Blade wanted his friends to get into MIT, so he went to Doctor Strange.
I mean, I
Um,
guess, to be fair, that could be if Kevin really wanted to go farther with it. Maybe Lawrence Fishburne was best friends with that version of Doctor Strange, and it's like Elijah or no, and it's Joaquin Phoenix, and he shows him how to how to use a portal. Because wasn't Joaquin Phoenix supposed to be Doctor Strange?
he was originally, yeah, but then he said he didn't want to commit to something with sequels, and then here he is doing Joker 2. But that's
So
neither
there you
here
go.
nor there. Um, yes, yeah, no, I think with Mahershala especially, for better or for worse, he is now getting up there, especially with how long they've delayed this movie. So I think going in like that old man direction, I feel like that kind of just like works for Blade in general. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
I don't know too much about the character, but he just gives off vibes of someone who would be like that old and grizzled loner, which like as you have alluded to is like kind of his point.
Yeah, no, that's
Um
definitely I'm with you 100%. I feel like they're neat because isn't that what their plan was for that first script? He'd be Old Man Blade training his successor.
so the original like script that they scrapped, it's been rewritten like 8 times, but like the story that everyone said was particularly bad was set in the 1920s. Mia Goth, who is in the movie, and who knows if she's playing the same character, but the character that she was hired to play was Dracula's daughter. And basically, Blade is a jazz musician in New Orleans in the 1920s, doesn't hunt vampires at all, doesn't do whatever, but has these vampire powers. Dracula's daughter finds him as, I guess you said, a Dampier, and convinces him to go with her to kill her father, Dracula, in Transylvania.
Okay.
And the movie was described as a road trip movie in post World War One Europe. And there were apparently just 2 action scenes in the entire script, including the final scene. And the script was like 91 pages, which like the rule of thumb is like 1 page is like 1 minute of screen time. So barely 90 minutes, 2 action scenes total, including the final scene. And apparently, in the final battle, basically Dracula's daughter is the one that takes on Dracula and deals the killing blow and kills Dracula, and Blade doesn't even do that. And then that's supposed to start his journey of wanting to use his power to other vampires.
So not only does this sound like trash, but I guess I'll go ahead and add since you brought it up. My second movie, I would have Blade meeting Lilith, which is Dracula's daughter, and then they would be going against Dracula. So ironically, I have that as the second movie. And then the third movie in my trilogy, I have Zarus, which is Dracula's son. And then in the comics, he leads this like insane hellish army, I guess is the best way to describe it. And Zarus and his army get revenge on Blade and Lilith for killing his father is like the main those are the two stories that I had kind of outlined for the second and third movie. Like I said, I would want to throw Blade's father in there somewhere, probably in the second one to kind of play with the dueling themes of Lilith and her dad and Blade and his dad and I don't know. That may be doing his dad's character a disjustice because he's a a bigger character in the comics, but I didn't really flesh that out as far. But yeah, that's the second one would be that movie you just described, just in way better form. I envision these more as like Guardians of the Galaxy level grand set piece kind of things, just because that's draconian's not the right word, but like probably gothic, I think is what you said. That's a good like that's what Blade is. He's very grand, he's very gothic, like almost imagine Ghost Rider kind of with the sets that they were doing where they would show hell and stuff like Legion. I don't know. Like I feel like these should be very grand pieces that evolve around him, if that makes sense. And so yeah, that's where and then that third movie is just the all out Blade and Lilith versus an army, and at that point he's probably met his friends. Maybe it's a Midnight Suns thing because Zarus's army is like legitimately one of the strongest groups of people I believe in the Marvel comics because he like leads this entire Hell army thing. So yeah, that would be how that would culminate.
And Midnight Suns has been rumored to be in development for like a Disney Plus series because, or it would probably be that Marvel Spotlights thing they got going on with Echo, where it's like TVMA, but they're releasing it on Hulu as well. Um, because Moon Knight is a thing now with Oscar Isaac, and then obviously we're getting Mahershala Ali as Blade, and like technically there's a Ghost Rider because they had the Robbie Reyes version of Ghost Rider in Agents of Shield, and Agents of Shield is kind of like yes, it's canon, no, it's not canon, yes, it is. So potentially they have like three members right there that are already established.
It's so I could be totally mistaken when they actually do it, but the Midnight Suns that I have read, I feel like should not be a TV show because generally speaking, and once again, I haven't watched their other shows, so maybe they don't do this. When I've seen, so like I'm going off the Netflix shows, those shows were a lot smaller in scale, and Midnight Suns is gigantic. Like I imagine Justice League Dark, that's Midnight Suns. It should be magic and underworld and like all the craziest darkest sides of MCU on screen together, and if they could do that in a show, cool. It would probably be cool to have multiple hours of that, but if they wouldn't be willing to give the budget for the show, I think that would be a missed opportunity.
I agree, but that's just one of those things that's been rumored.
Yeah, that would be I think I've said this to you before. Blade will be the movie that I don't want to say brings me back to the MCU, but that'll probably be the first MCU thing I watch in ages. And then if they did Midnight Suns, I'd probably watch that as well.
Well, there you go. Blade and Spider-Man 4. Maybe they'll cross over at some point.
Yes, that's the. Oh, one other question, just because I was curious. What did you think of my casting of Liev Schreiber? I wanted to bring him into the MCU.
Oh no, I love Liev Schreiber, especially in like he just gives vampire energy.
There,
I
okay,
thought
good.
he
I'm
was gonna be
you saw that
Dracula.
too.
Yeah, I thought he was gonna be Dracula, but one of the other things I appreciated was like I know you would eventually do Dracula, but I feel like he's like the easy answer for a Blade villain. So I like how you like did a little bit more of a deep dive and picked comic villains that weren't like the most obvious, at least to start.
Yeah, definitely. One, like you said, Dracula's the easiest, but I feel like he's also the sort of like Thanos, I guess, where it should probably be the culmination like it was in that original trilogy. And also, I have a little bit of a bias because Draconis is my favorite Blade villain, so I just wanted a chance to put him in live action. All right.